Well, we're recording now, so whatever we're talking about, it better get really good really quickly. Because there's no sense discussing what we should be discussing when we're supposed to be discussing what we're discussing.
I just, like I said, I'm just going to pretend like we're in a Chipotle in an airport somewhere.
And yeah, well, we've done that. We've done that at Chipotle in airports, haven't we?
That's where we do our best work.
So how's it going, man?
It's going well. Started training some people kind of outdoors now a little bit.
Oh, you're doing it outdoors now?
Yeah, just maintain distance, kind of just trying to be as safe as I can.
Are you guys, how is it in your state? What do you guys, what's the situation there? Are you guys?
No, I don't know, we're in some kind of phase where things have kind of opened up.
In some kind of phase,
I don't know. We're still playing pretend. There's not a virus out there, but we need the economy to go.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, I mean, priorities.
What about you guys?
We're in like we're in some phase two, not some phase two. We are in phase two, I believe. So the clinics opened up again, so we can see people, but it's weird. It's like masks and whatever. It is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's so funny how you can literally watch like commercials and brands catch on, like, oh, it's the new normal. That's like how every YouTube ad starts now.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, and then there's masks, and there's masks with labels on them, and now people are logoing masks, and it's a strange place. You know what I mean? And apparently there's no such thing as specialists anymore, and people who study things. You know what I was thinking the other day? So your job is obviously in the human body. You train, athletes, elite athlete, NFL guys. You train everybody to, move better so their bodies, function well. Imagine if I came to you and I said, like, give me something that you do, like FRC or something, or a particular type of training, right? Something that it's yours, you own it. And then I came to you and I was like, yeah, man, I don't fucking think you're right. You know what? Like, could you imagine, like, you go to a surgeon and the guy's going to do surgery on your neck, and he's like, yeah, well, we're going to take an anterior approach to the surgery. And you're like, yeah, you know what? I don't buy it. I think a posterior approach is better. No one says that, but for some reason, and dude, I've studied like pathology and microbiology and virology and, to a certain extent in school. And I still don't claim to know anything about that particular topic. Like, I don't know about contagious diseases. I do because I'm a doctor, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
it's just a strange time where it doesn't matter what you studied or how much effort you put into understanding a topic. As long as there's the internet, everyone has the same, level of knowledge.
There's no respect for depth, right? Like, the problem is within, and I'm sure I'm guilty on this with some subjects as well, like we all are, but you could Google something for an hour and feel like an expert, or like you have like enough language to fool yourself into thinking you're an expert. And now everybody's an epidemiologist apparently now.
Yeah, but I mean, let's not open that can of worms, but bringing it back, because I have on my list of shit to do, I have my Dr. Dre's versus the internet, right? Because have you seen those before? I just kind of take someone's ridiculous question and then, their question and then talk about what the question actually means. And I was just about to do one, which goes back to what you were saying, where people clearly read some stuff, right? And then for some reason they think you never read it. You know what I mean? Like, out of all the work that you do, you've never read what I've read, right? They just stumble across these things. Like one person, this happens all the time. You put up an exercise, one of our exercises, and within an hour, we're going to get some comment saying, what is this even good for? Do you ever get that? Do you ever get that comment on your thing? I gotta put this heater on. It's freezing down here. Like, what is this exercise even good for? And then I sit there and I don't really look at a lot of my comments, but every once in a while it picks you up. And I was like, well, maybe I should answer. But then how do you answer that? Like, if it's a hip exercise, how do you explain to someone that it's good because hips are good and you have a hip and hips working well is positive? Like, how do you explain that without sounding like you're being insulting?
Well, you can't, because the medium that you're doing, you can't you can't, most of the time, you're not going to be able to fast forward somebody like that to your thought process and what you did. So you have to kind of give them some kind of general answer, and then you're accused of not having depth. But then you're in a platform that you can't even present depth with, which is social media.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we did one of our I posted up, I don't know, a year ago, 2 years ago, one of our speed drills that we do for end range training. And then it was just to get some kind of glute extension or something. And somebody's like, why don't you just jump? And I'm like, I didn't say don't jump. I didn't say that at all.
You're like, fuck, I never thought of that.
Oh, really?
I could just jump? Like, oh man, I could just fucking like, instead of all of that like detail and thinking. And then the funny thing is in the copy, I pretty much know what you're talking about because I read the copy, and then the copy you're explaining exactly why you're doing what you're doing. But clearly copy doesn't matter, right? But in the copy, you're like, I'm doing this because of this. And all of that work could have been avoided if you just jumped, Chimpy. You know what I mean?
People, they want like something simple. I don't know. People get frustrated. Like, I'm not doing that. I just jump. Why don't you just jump? And it's like, okay, I mean, jump for who? How does this person jump? Like, what happens when they jump? What do they use to jump? You know, it's like, it goes down that, and people just get frustrated. I mean, I don't know. I don't have the motivation in me to leave a shitty comment on somebody's page because there's something else I could be doing. There's stuff I see where I'm like, this is stupid. I can't believe this happening. But
let's go into this because I was just thinking that I just put the 5th episode of the podcast out, right? And what I've noticed on YouTube, because a lot of people watching this on YouTube, is that there's like likes, thumbs up. So it's like, I don't know how many thumbs up there are, just like 100,000, whatever it is. And then there's one dude, and I don't know who you are out there. I don't know if it's the same guy, but there's always one thumbs down. And I always think to myself, what's the driving motivation? Like the motivator in your brain to go and do things is the dopamine, right? So you get a dopamine rush, which is the reason why you don't do nothing, right? If there's no dopamine, you do nothing. But you get this, I want to do something, I want to move, I want to overcome gravity. And the dopamine starts to build in your brain, and it gives you this motivation to move. And then you move, and the reason you move is so that when you do whatever you were doing, you can get your here and now neurotransmitters, your serotonin, your cannabinoids, all the stuff that makes you feel good. So conceivably, when you press thumbs down, you are motivated to there's something about you that you're like, after you press thumbs down, because the other option is do nothing, right?
Yeah, and it's actually less calories to just do nothing than it is to move the scroller and press thumbs down.
I don't know who you are. Maybe maybe if you're that guy, maybe you should write in on this episode and let us know, but it can't feel satisfying, man. Like you can't be, because your name's not on it. It's like, I disapprove. I disapprove. I just don't like it.
It's anonymous.
I don't like it. I just don't.
And then of course you'll get a bunch of great comments and one kind of shitty comment. Yeah. And then, the algorithms on YouTube want more discussion and more time, so they'll just put up that algorithm or that comment first.
Is that what happens?
I think so. I mean, that's what happens with Facebook and stuff like that. It's like they just find out what triggers people the most and they just show them more of that.
Well, that's what happens with the news, I guess. They don't, I always remember, they don't report on the planes that land. I always try to keep that in mind. You know what I mean?
Oh, I never thought of it like that.
Yeah. I don't know where I learned that, back in school somewhere, but one of my professors, they're never going to tell you about the planes that land. Do you imagine how boring the fucking news would be? Another plane landed today.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
99.9% of planes landed this month.
Who gives a shit? Tell me about the one that just exploded in fiery death. Like, that's how it is right now. You know what I mean?
Well, I think
I think that's just motivation. Like, there's no other way to motivate. It's just it's a byproduct of human consciousness and how easily it can be manipulated.
Well, I mean, you've studied this a lot too. And we've had conversations about this, but I think to bring people kind of up to speed about, where we're coming from. Well, what would you say is human consciousness from what you know and what you don't know?
Holy shit. What is today,
This
by the way?
this is probably not going to be a podcast where people are going to figure out how to fix their shoulder or their hip. This
You
could be
know
a little
what?
off the
You know
rails.
what it is, because it all comes back to that. First off, let's say that yeah. What was the question? What was the crazy question?
What is consciousness for
Oh,
according to you?
this is according to me. That's a good thing to say, because we don't want to claim to be consciousness, experts or researchers, just like we were saying before. But pose a question, you're going to get an answer. No, I have studied this because in order to, as you know, in order to really understand human movement, I don't know how you can do what we do without somehow running into two topics, which is the same topic. The one is human evolution, right? I don't understand how any therapist, trainer, actually, I really don't understand how anybody can study any topic that doesn't come back to human evolution in some degree. But if you're going to be in our profession and your job is to take Homo sapiens and make suggestions as to how to make them better at it, I can't imagine that you shouldn't study the definition of the thing you're working on, right? Like human evolution should be first day, first grade at chiropractic school, at physiotherapy school, at whatever. And I suppose along the same lines, human consciousness should also be studied, because in my opinion, it comes from the same, it's not my opinion, of course, it's the opinion of researchers that I've studied. It comes from the same vein. So, I mean, the coolest way that I like to think about it now, and I think this came from, I think it's global workspace theory, Stanish, I can't remember the author's name, but it was described as consciousness as being, if you're at a play and all of the spotlights are shining down on the stage, okay? So the light that the stage, the light that's shining on the stage, or what the light is shining on, is kind of human consciousness. And then you have the stage hands in the background, and you have the audience in the foreground, but they're dark, right? So this would be the realm of unconsciousness. So the thought being is that you have all of these, all of this chatter or this stuff occurring in your unconsciousness, and then that cumulatively shines a light on what you want to pay attention to.
So vast majority of the brain's activity is subconscious. It's not even in your forefront.
Okay, so I don't,
the lights.
Yeah. Okay, so you can, you can tell me what you think, but I don't think if consciousness is a byproduct, then it sure as hell is not the focus, right? So yeah, to say that most stuff is in your subconscious is 100%. It's 100% fact. Almost everything is in your subconscious, right? Almost everything. Like, think of how many calculations are being done right now for me to just grab my coffee cup without seeing it and take a drink. Like, if you had to keep up with all of that, like, think of right now how weird it would be if your consciousness picked up your earbud and how it felt in your ear at all times, right? You know, when you say when you put socks on, you can't feel your socks after a while. Imagine how that would be if you were consistently taking in all of these feedbacks, right? So no, it's like your subconscious tunnels what consciousness is allowed to concentrate on. Because in my opinion, and then consciousness has to be a byproduct of natural selection from the human evolution process. If humans are the only ones that have this higher level of consciousness, then somehow that had to be related to evolution, because all of our ancestors have a different level of consciousness, conceivably, going back to the most basic organisms. Does this make sense?
Yes. So expand on that. Then you're saying like humans have the hardware to have this kind of attention span or something, or be able to, because it's a mix, right? Because you can think in the future, you can kind of plan ahead, which I think is one of the things that separates us from what we know of most other species, that we plan ahead. We have like, a prefrontal cortex and stuff that helps with forward thinking. This always relates back to the work that you and I do with people, is that people they have concentration issues. They don't really have a body issue as much as they have a concentration issue that manifests itself into a body issue, right? For most people. And it's like, hey, they don't know how to take care of themselves, like the stuff that we're teaching, like they don't get a manual on how to like preserve their health and do that. And also, like, we're not in our natural environment. right? We're Homo sapiens in a non-Homo sapien environment, at least most of us, the vast majority of people on Earth. If you think about what we do on a day-to-day basis compared to what we were naturally selected to do, it's vastly different. And it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Some things are awesome, but there's a lot of ways that it's taking its toll on us. I mean, just the work that you and I do, and the people in our community, and just people in general in the fitness industry. I mean, we're constantly trying to have people care and consider their health, because the environment, like hunter gatherers, never had to consider really their health at the depth that we have to, right? Because the environment they were in, they were just like, don't get eaten, don't get sick, eat enough food, stay out of trouble.
Well, I think exercise was just the byproduct of staying alive, if that's what you're saying. At the point of hunter-gatherer, like health and wellness and exercise was not the focus, because it couldn't be, but it just so happened to be a byproduct of what the focus was, which is to avoid getting eaten, to eat other things, and then to have sex, right?
Yes, to make more of you.
To make more of you. Yeah, you said a lot of things there. Like one thing that you did say, and I don't know if you read what you said from. I read the thing that you said about the anticipatory nature of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of said that it allows you to make predictions. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I read that in Michio Kaku in his book. Oh God, which book? I don't remember. Michio Kaku, he's the physicist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he defined it. He defines it from a physicist standpoint, but I like the way he does it from the perspective that there's levels of consciousness. So like there's level 1, level 2, level 3.
Okay.
And, level 1 is at the plant vegetation level where and then level 2 would be the level of animals. Let's say if the animals that we assume have less consciousness than us, because if you want to talk about dolphins and octopus, I don't know that we want to get into that, but it might be close. Anyway, you have level 2, which would be like animals, and the level 3 would be humans, and it's all graded based on your ability to anticipate, right? So your ability to look into the future, to plan, and to predict. So the idea is that an animal plans into the future, but only a very short amount of time. So they can only predict the immediate future if they're in a hunt. You know what I mean? They don't think about like what's going to become of me in 20 years. Like they don't have that predictive capacity, but then humans do, right? So at the highest level of consciousness, it's the idea that we have this ability to see into the future, so to speak, and then using that information, we can change how we effectively live in the environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just going to say that's exactly how he defines it, as this ability. So getting back to what I was saying before. So in my assumption, or my view, it has to be a byproduct of evolution. So there has to be a good evolutionary reason as to why consciousness was selected for, right? And the way I see it, if you think of it that way, the one good reason why consciousness would be selected for is because consciousness allows you to make even further predictions into the future. Mm-hmm. Right?
Well, it allows you to create if you get back to like the stuff that we've kind of read in Sapiens, great book. It allows you to assimilate a culture, and then your culture can fast forward and evolve much faster than your biology can.
Yes.
And you know how to, okay, hey, 3 grandfathers ago, I learned how to tie this arrowhead.
3 grandfathers ago. Yeah.
I learned how to tie this arrowhead better, so that it doesn't fuck up when it hits the animal. And then you're like, those little like compounding improvements, lead to more of you, more food, more babies, blah, blah, blah. And like, that's like kind of, I guess that's the biological definition of success for a species, is that it can just make more of itself. And then you take it through that filter for hundreds of thousands of years. And, but now you have today, right? And you and I are such proponents of meditation. Like if you live like most people live today, like a concentration, as you call it, a concentration practice is probably needed for most people, because there's such a war on our attention from everything.
You know what? Meditate. I do want to talk about that with you because I know that you practice meditation a lot. But before we going back to what we were saying before, you're familiar with Sam Harris's Free Will. Have you read that long essay, Free Will?
I haven't read the long essay. I've heard him talk about it. I still try to wrap my head around it, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
Well, I mean, he's talked about it a lot. Actually, there was a good conversation between him and Dan Dennett. I don't know when it was, how long ago, on this very topic. I think a few conversations on it. But anyway, the idea there is a lot of it's based on the research that tells you that your decision-making process that's not the right word. The decision-making process precedes your conscious ability to make a decision. Okay. So what research has demonstrated is that when I ask you a question, your answer is already provided for you somehow several milliseconds before your conscious brain picks up the idea that it's there, right? So if I say think of a vegetable, go ahead, say it.
Okay, zucchini.
So you said zucchini. Like the question that he would pose is, why did you pick zucchini, right? And now you're going to use your conscious brain to develop some kind of story, because that's what the conscious brain does. It tells you stories so that you can try to understand what the hell's going on in your environment, right? So your conscious brain makes up a story. Oh, I just ate zucchini, or, my favorite color is green, so I picked zucchini. But that's not what happened. What happened is something just shot into your head and it was given to you, right? Name an actor.
Michael J. Fox.
Where the fuck did that come from, right? There you go. We don't have to talk about this shit anymore. You just proved it. The fact that you said Michael J. Fox means that everything I say is completely 100% accurate. No, but that's the idea. It gets popped into your brain. So again, okay, so you know how you keep learning that you're not supposed to understand what's going on because our brains didn't evolve to understand what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of, in my opinion, consciousness, right? Because from an evolutionary standpoint, really what your brain has is it has sensations, right? So you take in sensations, you take in auditory sensation or auditory sound, you take in visual, you take in touch sensation, you take in, afferent sensation from touching your environment. So your body's hardware is geared towards the assemblance and understanding of sensation coming from its periphery, right? That's what it's for, right? So consciousness, what is that? Like if you and your wife are in a fight and you say, oh my God, I feel bad. What you're really describing physical feelings, right? You're describing a physical feeling. People think that emotions are somehow unattached to your sensations, but they're not. Like when you're in a fight with your wife, you get that, oh, I have this weird feeling in my stomach, right? Or people have, they're depressed, they get stomach pains, they get gut issues, they get all of these physical ramifications. And that's because physical ramifications is all we have. Like we're just beings that respond to forces in the environment, right? We're just responding. And now you have consciousness, which is just a way of thinking about what's going on, and that ultimately gets confused, because I don't think we're supposed to necessarily be contemplating when we're going to die or those types of things. Like
so consciousness is like a filter for the real-time information that you have coming in a sense. It's part of what you think it could be.
To make it make sense. You know what I mean? To make it make sense. Because again, it's just okay, going back to meditation, because that's where I was going with that. It's like, if you think about what meditation is, at least I will tell you what I think it is, and you can disagree with me, but it's trying to get to the point where you're just taking in sensory information. You're just bathing in sensory information, right? Because I hate the way people explain meditation. It's like, think about your breath. Well, then if you tell me to think about my breath, I'm going to think about myself thinking about my breath. So it's not think about your breath. What you're really supposed to be saying is experience your breath. And then people stop there in meditation as if the breath has some kind of, amazing power. But that's not true. It's just something to kind of stake your claim into. I'm going to concentrate here. But then eventually your meditative practice has to expand to the fact that you're just there to take in any and all sensory information, right? And as the sensory information comes in and it gets amalgamated in your brain, and then that amalgamation shoots stuff into your consciousness, you're just supposed to observe that and say, oh, look at that. All of the chatter of my sensation made me think of a zucchini. And then you're supposed to go back to the absorption of sensation.
No, I think I agree. It really is just like, where are you gonna? It's like I don't know where I heard this analogy, but it's basically like a spotlight for your attention, right? Like it's just wherever you're gonna focus on, and you have to practice that. I remember when we had, I don't know what city it was, we were walking and we were talking, and you said something that was that stood out to me. That was like, the best I could hope for with meditation is like, if I'm about to emotionally react, like if I just recognize that I'm emotionally reacting and I still have that negative reaction, like that is the key, is like just to have that pause, just to have that separation from you and your autonomic process. Yes. And then if you practice that enough, like maybe you can make an actual decision of what to do to not have that reaction, if that's not the reaction to have. And it's just like a bicep curl for your brain. It's like, okay, just feel it. Okay, now how do you want to react? And I think that's the best we could hope for, being just barely hairy bipedal apes. Fast forward into 2020 is like, have a little bit more awareness of our reactions, because we operate off of so much like instinct and learned behavior. Like, where do memories come from? Isn't that like a past information feeds into your conscious decision? So how, like, if the stuff is just emergent, what's the point of memory? Why do people loop constant memories all the time? Is that just because they're trying to worry about the future? I know that's a huge topic, but
ultimately it's because they're trying to organize three-dimensional space. But that's we're going to have to go real far to get back to that problem, because again, I said this before, we don't think in words, man, and we think in movement and three-dimensional space. That's what thoughts are, and that's what forces are, and that's what sensations are. I mean, so man, you said a lot of stuff, and I don't even know where the jump off point is best to begin there. But yeah, I think for what we're gathering here is that it's almost like you're trying to separate consciousness and live without it temporarily. If only temporarily, you get to a point where you observe what consciousness is, which is this emergence of ideas. It's like your brain's trying to get your attention, right? Your brain's like made of a bunch of areas or centers, and all of these things want your attention. So they're just throwing out sensory information, and then what appears on the stage of your consciousness is what appears on the stage of your consciousness, right? And then the ability to observe that and say, oh, that's just another thought, and understand that a thought is not a something. It's just a passing, you know what I mean? It's a passing thing. If you have a thought there, the thought's going to be gone. And that observation of thoughts coming and going means that you've separated yourself from conscious thought, and you're kind of spending time in the creative, where those thoughts are coming from, right? Which is where I like to think creativity comes from. And it's not me. That's what a lot of really creative, smart people would say. Creativity comes from a time when you're in a flow state, which is really a time where you've lost track of time because you're so ultimately concentrated on what you're doing, and you're so bathed in serotonin and cannabinoids that your focus is 100% taken up by what you're doing, which is another way of saying that you're immersed in what you're doing past consciousness, right? You're immersed in it more because you're just experiencing it as a sensation. And I remember, I want to go back to what you said before I forget the point. You said something about, why do you meditate? You meditate so that, when your kids get, my kids get me upset for whatever reason, it's not like you don't get upset, right? I don't care if you're the fucking Dalai Lama. Like, if you don't get upset, you're just bullshitting me. You do, right? But the idea that you can identify what it feels like to be upset, and that gets back to what we were saying before. There's a feeling, a physical feeling. Forget consciousness. There's a physical feeling to anger, right? There's a physical feeling to being upset. Like if I'm getting angry because, let's say, my kids aren't cleaning up fast enough. If, you know, you build up and you go, come on, guys, you might raise your voice. You might say this, you might say that. You might, you might get fed up. But if you stop in that moment and go, what does this feel like right now? You can feel an anxiety, which feels like a heart rate. What does anxiety feel? That your heart rate's a little bit up, your shoulders are a little bit more tense. It's a physical manifestation of actually, I was going to say it's a physical manifestation of what you're thinking, but actually it's a thinking manifestation of what you're physical, right? Because it all comes back to the physical, right? So if you can separate yourself from this conscious chatter and you experience the background, which is what absorbs these incoming signals, then you start to say, oh, that anger is actually an incoming signal. I identified this signal. And then because you can identify it, you can let it go a little bit faster than if you didn't practice doing this. Right?
Yes.
So, I apologize that much sooner. And if you can apologize 10 minutes sooner than you usually do, I'm going to tell you your life's going to get better. Like I'm no expert in life, but if you can apologize 10 minutes sooner than you usually do, it's pretty fucking remarkable, I think.
Say sorry 10 minutes faster.
Yeah, because ultimately, like, what are you arguing about? Shut up. Like, you know what I mean? Like most things you argue about is nonsense, right? Most thing you argue about is probably because you get a physical sensation that you don't like. You know what I mean? Like Kati, your wife tells you, oh, I saw that video you posted. It sucked. And then you get mad. Why are you getting mad? She's helping you. The video probably sucked. But you get this feeling like,
oh, my ego.
Oh, my ego got punched.
Your videos are so good.
Yeah.
Don't let anybody tell you.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is like you need an ego at some point, because the ego keeps you, like, lets you brush your teeth, right? The ego does kind of help you it's a biological mechanism for you recognizing self and taking care of self, right? So you do need at some level to have self-preservation. But if it gets unchecked, I was thinking this the other day, is like, how can I be mad at my ego? Because even though it says crazy shit in my head, its purpose is to protect me at some level.
Yeah, I guess. First off, I mean, saying ego makes us sound like a bunch of, oh, look at the ego. I don't want to come off.
It's got a baggage to it. Right?
I don't want to come off of those people who quote Nietzsche on Twitter but never fucking read a word that the person wrote. That drives me crazy. I'm pretty sure if you count up the number of quotes from the Buddha that went out on social media today, and then you count the number of people who have read more than a page about Buddhism, I am pretty sure they don't match up, right? Like there's a lot of people just retweeting quotes that they like. I hate that. So I don't want to come across like,
sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And having said that, I forgot if there was a question there. I was just saying I don't want to come off as that person. What were you saying?
I don't know. My ego says it doesn't matter.
Oh, your ego.
Yeah.
So to say ego is weird. So how do you think about that? Because there's two levels, in my opinion, of meditation. One is, as you alluded to this, one is the realization as to why it's important, which in my opinion requires a scientific understanding. And then two is the practice of it, because just having a scientific understanding doesn't mean that you meditate. And I think that people get very confused with that. You know what I'm saying? It's just like with cars, with our circle, like some people know cars, but they don't do cars. And knowing cars is not going to do shit for your joints. Doing cars helps you. So the first level of understanding what meditation is, which is like from a neurophysiological standpoint, we just described it. And then there's the idea of practice, right? Of actually doing, which are two different things.
But you have to, it's like people will say, oh, I get a meditation when I run, or I do meditation when I'm moving. And it's like,
no, you don't.
You're focused on the running, and that's good, but it's not formal practice. It's like saying like, oh, I move my joints, I flow. And it's like, but no, it's not like you're not doing the uncomfortable work, right? Which is just actually, for most people, is formally sitting still and practicing their attention. Now you can take that. Ideally, you're taking that container of what you learn in that practice, and you're applying it throughout the day over time. That's the goal. But so many people are just confused. Like you said, they think they know meditation's good, so they just assume that they're doing it when their mind is less noisy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they use it as a thing, as like a therapy, and we're partly our profession bad because it's like, what's a good thing for back pain, and then list chiropractic manipulation, NSAIDs, meditation. It's like they use it as I'll take fries with that. They use it as a tool, but ultimately, when I talk to patients and I'm teaching them how to meditate, I always tell people, don't expect anything, because as soon as you expect something, you've undermined the entire purpose of it, right? The idea is to expect nothing, because what you're doing is sitting and trying your best to do the ultimate form of Homo sapien nothingness, which is to just sit there and be your sensations, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's just. You have to practice doing that, and then as you do that, you start to feel, like I said, what anger feels like, feel what sadness feels like. So you can start to anticipate, maybe using our level 3 consciousness, when you're starting to feel a certain way, and then you can bring it back to, I don't want to say the now because that's so cliche, but the ability to stop what you're doing. Because when you're angry, again, if you're angry at something, usually you're angry at something that's about to happen or something that did happen. But when you really stop and think about it, you sitting here right now, are you really angry right now? The answer is no, right? So, I might have a deadline coming up and it's making me upset, and I'm getting, my temper goes here, but I'm really only have that because I'm projecting my future self, which doesn't exist, right? I'm looking at the future. I'm saying whatever is going to happen in the future is going to make me upset. So I might as well just discharge upset hormones and neurotransmitters now, which doesn't make any fucking sense, right? Or I'm thinking, man, I really fucked up 2 days ago, which means that now I'm getting a physical reaction now, right? The chemicals, the chemical soup is happening now, but it's happening based on something that happened 2 days ago, which means that what you're doing is illogical, right? If you stop and think about it right now, you're going to feel better about whatever the problem is. Even if you're in pain, if you just stop and think about the pain, like just stop and be here and take in the sensation of pain, a lot of the times for my patient, that makes them feel a lot better when they're not taking pain and then compounding pain with future worry about pain.
Yes, 100%. Well, it's like you're kind of like what you said was great about either the past or the future, because in the present, you're kind of just creating threat for the sake of threat. You're just manifesting threat. And speaking about pain, right? I mean, with your experience and my experience, I mean, how many, like, take somebody who has chronic pain, let's just say lower back pain, and correlation is not causation, but how many, if you could even quantify this percentage wise of patients that you see that have chronic back pain, and just from the surface of talking with them in that first session, you can tell that they're scattered. Like they don't have a great attention span. They're either they don't pick up on the social cues, they cut you off, or they finish thoughts within the middle of thoughts. And it's like one of those things, like, what came first? Was it the chronic pain, or was it like the rampant mental chatter that goes on in their head, and how are they linked? Because the pain pulls you out of the moment, like you said, anticipating pain, thinking about how pain was, increasing your pain tolerance so you have more pain. I mean, it's a whole rabbit hole.
I mean, rather than blame the person, I think, not that you're blaming the person, but I think a better way to think about that, or a better way to contemplate that question is, how quickly can you reduce pain levels with simply getting someone to, bringing them in to talk about the pain, to explain the pain, to reconstruct what the future of the pain is going to be, right? If you ask me as a therapist, is there anything you do that is faster than that to bring pain levels down? The answer is no. I've said this before, you know this. I don't think as a therapist I'm dealing a lot with pain, right? A byproduct is people feel better, but I think that we're trying to change physical tissue and by doing that, making better tissue ultimately makes you function better, and then the byproduct is usually get less pain. But from a pain standpoint, if you say, what's the most effective thing you can do? And I'm going to say meditate, and everyone's going to go, oh, he sounds like a, everyone always says that. Whenever you talk meditation, you sound like you're being ascientific. When I tell people, look into the research, there's more research on meditation than most things that we talk about, right? But that would be the most powerful thing I can do, right? Is to teach someone how to meditate, which is simply to say, teach someone how to concentrate on all of the physical sensations that are occurring right now. Again, right? How do you do that? Somebody might ultimately start with, well, let's get you breathing and get them to try to think about breathing, or in my opinion, experience breathing. And then, okay, now experience the sound. Now, I like to use a lot of cues. One cue that I like when I'm teaching a patient, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but for me, if you're ever going to touch that point where you're no longer your egoic mind, you're the muse, like you're the background, you're the creative, right? To me, it happens at the moments in between inhalation and exhalation, right? If you inhale and then you exhale and pause, there is, to quote Simon and Garfunkel, there is a sound of silence. Does that make sense? Like if you're in a completely quiet room, in between your inhale and your exhale, there is a hum. And the only way I can describe it is a hum. And I like to think about it like all of the working as things in your body, all of those billions of cells are busy working. And that's the hum of them working, which clearly doesn't make any fucking sense. That's not what that is. It's probably just a reverberation of your eardrum from the air in the room or whatever. But that moment is where I like to get people to concentrate on, right? And I find you get them to do that, then they start to anticipate the next exhalation, and then they can spend more time in there. And then if you do that long enough, you can hear that sound of silence even through your breathing. That's me. That's how what do you do? That's a good like. What do you, I know you're on Harris's thing, right? You use Sam Harris's. Do you use his app because it's amazing scientific description of meditation, or because you like the guided meditations?
Both. I like. There's always different topics on there. He's got different lessons about like free will part 2. Understanding that like everything that you do, there's always going to be a last time, right? There's going to be a last time that, not to give him a roast, but there's a last time I'm going to hold my wife's hand, right? It's going to be just recognize that everything that you do, at some point, there's going to be a last.
That's pretty goddamn roast there. You really, you went fast. I was like,
I didn't get to show another example.
I was enlightening people out of pain, and then you just went, bam! Remind me not to let you open for me if I ever do comedy. Holy shit.
There's gonna be a last time you feel pain. There you go. Bring it back.
Yes, that's better.
No, but especially even like so I do that. I also try to be mindful of my body when I'm practicing my body. I mean, I think that it can translate over. I mean, that's a lot of the work that we do with people. I mean, I think when I was first coaching, especially when I was using more of the FRS system 5-6 years ago, it was it still is very technical, but now it's morphed over into more experiential. It's like, I want you to feel your shoulder. Like, I can't tell you what to feel, but like, do you feel anything on the front? Do you feel anything on the back? Like, what do you, like we always say at the course, like, what are the tasting notes? And you're trying to guide somebody.
What did you say? What are the
tasting notes? That's Dewey's example, like the wine tasting notes. You never hear him say that?
Oh no, I haven't heard Dewey say that.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a great way to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Dewey Nielsen, awesome.
Yeah.
But you're guiding somebody through their body, and in that process, especially, I mean, I'm not doing therapeutic hands-on work because that's not in my scope, but I do have so many people that come in with pain, and you do what you can, and one of the first several, I mean, all of it, but especially the first several sessions working with somebody, it's really about building an awareness and giving them like, okay, this is how I want you to take care of yourself when I'm not around, right? Like, what do you feel? And it's so much about like, I want you to try to find, I always say, like, let's say they finally find a stretch in the back of their hip, right? And it's taken a little bit of time. I'll always be like, all right, I want you to screenshot that feeling in your head. And then you need to find this at home when you're not with me, because that's where we have to start our work. So there's a lot of, we always call internal training, but there's a lot of internal focus in what we're trying to do, because most, like you say, most people are not connected with their bodies. So when dealing with people with pain, it really is like you're kind of guiding their attention into what you can do, right? To kind of not distract them, but to pull their attention away from the pain as much as you can. Because pain is
pull it into now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know if I want to say, like, when I say now, I don't want to, I'm not like
Deepak Chopra kind of thing.
No, that's actually Eckhart Tolle, which, I mean, I hate self-help books, because personally I do. I'm not saying if they help you, that's fine, but I always think to myself, the people writing self-help books are the people who don't need them. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and then anyway. So I didn't want to interrupt what you said, but I was going to say Eckhart Tolle is one that I've read where if I read through a lot of the stuff that I don't find necessary, I like the way he explains now, which is alluding to what you said. When you bring someone back to right now, whatever is bothering them, it's still there, but it's not compounded by the future and the past. So whatever you're doing, it's better now. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's if you deal with it in the now, you'll usually end up being better. So that's what you're saying. You're trying to bring the person to understand them in space. Yeah.
And the body is how the body, like, just like it's like, experience your breath. It's like, well, let's experience your back. Like, what do you feel? Like, there are parts that you feel disconnected? Where do you feel connected? Like, you just pose these questions because you want them to consider. They want them to consider stuff. It's stuff that you would consider if you're practicing on yourself as well. Like, I feel really good here. Like, I feel a little sticky there. And I think we had, I don't know, we had this discussion, you and I, sometime we were in Europe or something like that, but it always stood out to me is like, and you should expand on it, but how the difference in people when you would have them come in and you would have a sheet of where they would draw the pain and the level of detail that varied from person to person. Like, that really had some light bulbs for me.
But that's not, maybe because you're not from a therapy standpoint, but any therapist listening to this will know, like, if you give a pain chart to someone, and the pain chart is just like there's a picture of a body. You might have a VAS scale where you can say my pain's 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. And then you have a human body, and you can say indicate where, if there's any numbing, just put some N's. If there's tingling, put T's. If it's throbbing, put whatever. It just gives you a way. So like, my shoulder hurts. I can say, oh, my shoulder hurts. It's throbbing pain. Just pick up some information. But what we really give that to patients for is to see the response as to how they draw it. If you come in and I just see a circle on your shoulder and that's it, then the person, this is not 100% across the board, right? But you can anticipate that the person isn't solely focused on just that problem, right? It's a problem. That's why they're there and they want to deal with it. But some people, they'll circle and then they'll do stars and then they'll color themselves in. Like, they'll literally, like, it hurts here, and then it refers over here, and then it refers here, and then arrows here in this area, and then a star here, because they want you to remember, like, they want you to remember, I'm here for my shoulder, but other things bother me too, right? And I understand, right? People who are in chronic pain, I mean, I worked in chronic pain for a lot of years, and it's a horrible thing, right? And when someone's in chronic pain, it's far beyond the physical problem of the pain usually. So it's a sad thing to see, but because you asked, you'll see that they'll have their whole body colored in. Sometimes they'll put a face, they'll put a sad face, they'll put an angry face. I think from my experience, when I get to talk to them, the vast majority of that is a direct result of them feeling like they haven't been heard and that no one is giving enough attention to that problem. You know what I mean? Because I often find that somebody will come in with a MRI with findings, and they'll have shoulder and everything's colored in, and then you talk to them and you ask them, did anybody ever explain to you what this means on this MRI? Like, what that word is or what that word is? And as soon as you just start to explain it, I find the levels just start to drop right down, right?
Yes.
As soon as you say, oh yeah, I see your shoulder hurts here, and I notice you're telling me that your elbow also hurts, and you put stars here. So for sure, that's important. And I don't know if they're related, but the body does work together. So let's equally look at your shoulder and your elbow. And then it's a matter of saying, let's look at your shoulder first, or trying to, because you can't treat everything at the same time.
Yes.
I don't know if that was a question. That's just how I deal with it. But
no, I think it's really a very thoughtful response, because as a trainer, because I come from the training aspect of it too, like I'll have people that come in and, in the back of your mind, it was more evident when I was younger, but in the back of your mind, you're kind of like, okay, like we need to get more stuff done. But sometimes for consultation, especially with people who are in chronic pain, like I'm expecting to start our functional range assessment at some point in like the first part of it, at least. But sometimes you have like, I just don't interrupt. The person goes on for like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And you just want to be heard.
Yeah.
And it's their time. Who am I to be like, okay, like we have to get going. Like it's a big thing. And like, even just taking the time and having more empathy, and just like, I know of course you have an agenda. You want to make sure that this person's getting the most bang for buck, but sometimes, or the most for their time for what they're investing into. But sometimes it's just listening, especially if you deal with a lot of people with chronic pain. I get the whole gamut. I get, high level athletes, and then you have people with like, EDS syndrome and just tons of chronic pain, and everybody in between. So like having that variety and having that ability to have empathy, as well as like know that you're going to be able to at least provide some kind of a sense of security, as far as like, all right, here's what we're going to do. I can't necessarily say that your pain is going to get better by doing this, but in my experience, people feel better when they move better.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to be intellectually honest, but at the same time give them hope, because self-belief is a huge part of that healing process, thinking that there is an end to what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go back. I'm interested. Go back to, because I know how I feel about it, and we started talking about it, and then we kind of dropped it. Is that the programs that we teach, like I said, the most important and the first job is to make someone familiar with themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea of getting the person familiar with their meat wagon, as we sometimes refer to it, their meat dressing, their meat suit, like getting them familiar. I've always, in my experience, it's told me very clearly that most people that come in to see us, their problem lies in that, right? Ultimately, yes. The problem lies, so it can manifest as tendinopathy, it can manifest as whatever, but ultimately, the vast majority of the people who walk through the door, they are not in control of their meat wagon. So I'll often tell people, if people are listening, if they ever listen to if you ever seen Weekend at Bernie's, do you remember that movie?
It's a great movie.
Old movie, right? Where the guy's dead, but it behooves them to make people think he's alive because of a very interesting and comedic plot that I advise that you go and check out. But anyway, so they have him walking around, and when they have to wave to people, they're putting his arm up and putting his arm down, and they're going like this because he's on like guide wires and shit. And I feel like that's, no joke, a lot of the problem when people come in and they have problems with musculoskeletal health, dysfunction, pain, or whatever. It's just a lack of familiarity. And to go back to what you were saying, I think you can do a moving meditation. Like once you get to the point, you can do a moving meditation. It takes a lot of training, but in addition to meditation, you should probably also do moving meditation. And that's a lot of stuff that we give people. And before I let you go off, understand that what we're talking about is not unscientific, right? The idea that if you take your thinking mechanism and you direct its job towards your shoulder, the idea that if you direct the thinking mechanism's energy towards the shoulder, that you're not going to increase the ability for the thinking mechanism to function the shoulder, you're crazy. That's completely scientific. So when we're saying be mindful when you're moving, what we're really saying is, concentrate to the extent that you can, all of your conscious ability into that joint as you move it, and pay more attention to the experiences coming from that joint than all of the millions of other sensory experiences that are coming in. Mm-hmm. So there's no question, but tell me about, like, what's the experience with that, with training people?
It's interesting because when I first work with somebody, I feel like a veterinarian. whereas the person doesn't have the language yet to tell me what they feel and what's wrong. Right. So part of it is we have to teach them a language, right? Do you feel a pinch here? Like, where do you feel it? How do your cars feel? They feel sticky, right? You almost have to give them things so they can help guide you into where they need the work. Obviously we have like an assessment, right? We do the functional range assessment. So we look at every joint and, see what it's capable of doing by itself and how that relates to whatever their goals are. But the whole process is just really about like, okay, like every week, we're seeing once a week, or you're going to see me like 2 or twice a week. It's like, I'm so focused in on you knowing what to do when I'm not around. Because like, you only see me, if you can, you see me 3 times a week, but there's, 170 hours in a week.
They're not given, getting back to meditation, people are not given enough information about the species they're part of.
Yes.
And because of it, they can't, like, you're not given enough information to take care of, let's say, one's mental health, one's physical being. Where do you learn this? This is what frustrates me. Like, you're teaching someone about physical, but why do we expect people to know this? And I'm bringing this up because you're right. What you know is going to be way more useful to that person than whatever exercise you prescribe or whatever treatment I give. Like, your job is to give them what you know. And the first part about this is, hey, you are Homo sapien. Homo sapien is this. And to manage Homo sapiens joints, you need this. To manage Homo sapiens mental health, you need this. And no one else is teaching it, right?
No, but no, I'm sure we at some point we sound like a broken record, but it influences every decision that we make, right? And one time we were talking and we were like, how would we approach, like, what if an NFL team, because we get approached by them, they want to know what we want to, like, how would you train somebody? How would you take our team? And it's like, well, you'd almost have to start with the answer, right? And the answer is what you said, is like, okay, we're not shitting on sports, but we have to understand that, like, from what the science says, like, this is probably where we came from, right? Okay, good. Now we're in this is our normal situation, and this is the kind of differences that we have. And we know that sports is also generally, like, there's going to be a lot of damage on the body from sports. Yes or no? Right? Okay. So then, if we're trying to get people to play optimal, we have to probably undo a lot of the damage that they're getting in their sport, right? I'm speaking vaguely, but basically what I'm saying is, like, we have to make sure that their stuff is optimized so that they can do their sport. And then you're asking, like, well, how do I fit the training in? And it's like, because people often, you'll give them the answer, right? But they want to massage the answer into what their situation is, but really have to massage the situation to what the answer is. So the answer is, like, you should still play, you should still compete, but there's things that we need to change so that your players can still play at the highest level. But you only have so much time during the day, during a training session, to inflict. So there's some stuff that we have to take out. Maybe some stuff that for many decades was considered sacred and hollow ground, like thou shall squat, thou has to do cleans. Like, I don't know why you would want a wide receiver to do hang cleans when they make millions of dollars with their hands, but let's take that out and let's give them a wrist.
They don't. I mean, if you're listening to this, if you've ever, it's amazing how people think professional athletes train and then how they actually train.
Yes.
And if you think that in the MLB training rooms, people are doing fucking hang cleans, I mean, it's not what happened. I mean, in any good training room, to be honest with you. But anyway, I don't want to interrupt you. I like what you're riffing on. Because
go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I was just, and so people, like, what did we say one time? What you said, it's like, well, okay, like, if I do this, how am I going to train rotation? It's like, well, fucking 3 hours of baseball practice is rotation. How much rotation why don't you have something to rotate well with?
Yeah. That was the situation we were teaching. And then somebody was concerned because we were saying, with your players, you need to do this as well as what you're doing, right? You have to add this to training, because what we're asking you to do is to train the internal the person internally in conjunction with external training, but everyone else is only doing external training. So the idea was, when am I going to train like the rotation of my body? So we were baseball players. When are we going to, because we would say, well, these spines can't rotate. So let's stop training, wood chops and let's start fixing the spine. And then someone said, well, when are you going to train rotational strength then? It's like, well, those guys were just on the field. They just did batting practice. And conceivably, they just did 300 to 400 reps where they put max efforts dynamically as much as they could into smashing a baseball at the end of an enormous moment arm, which means that the amount of stress in the body in rotation, I mean, how much more do you want? Like,
you're good.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, let's maybe work on the spine not exploding on the 500th rep, right?
Yeah. Or like back to like wide receivers. Like, well, we need to do cleans to train power. It's like, well, fuck, they were just out there doing 10-yard starters. They were running routes. I saw the guy over there. He jumped over 3 guys in practice. Like, how much? Like, what about an ankle? Like why do you need to do
At what point do you say, you know what, if bench pressing 10 more pounds is not going to ultimately be the difference? You know what I mean? Like, maybe we should fucking make that ankle do ankle stuff.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say maybe you should try to keep as many of your starters healthy by the end of the year, because those teams typically win the championships.
That's usually how that works. Because we talk about that a lot too. With athletics, a lot of people think that the best athlete, the highest athlete, their training must be the best, right? You hear this all the time. But no, it's a lot of people, the reason why some athletes rise to the top is because their bodies put up with the most shit, right? It's like everyone's doing this stuff, everyone's getting damaged. They ward off being damaged a little longer because of some genetic gift, but that's the genetic gift. There's a lot of genetic gifts to athletes, granted, and it's amazing, and I'm not downplaying what athletes can do, but one of their genetic gifts seems to be their ability to manage forces better than other people or for a longer period of time. But rest assured, they will also be damaged, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's yeah.
I mean, how many athletes do we see on TV? And if you go back to when they were in high school, maybe there was a better player than them, but they got injured the game that the scouts came to go do it. They blew out their ACL. And this guy who was also really good got a chance. And he, because of that changed a series of events. And why did that happen? Well, he probably had maybe he had a body that was ill prepared for the type of training he was doing in his high school football program. Plus, football itself, it wasn't addressed. And like you said, like, it's like almost like, if you get enough, if you with enough pressure, you'll find some diamonds. Essentially. And that's what we're seeing.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. You crush enough athletes, you'll find the genetic responders who can put up with it. So it's like, plus, like, it's weird that people want to, like, if you think of high athletic competition, it's kind of a fringe, right? And it's not synonymous with health, right? And like, we've talked about this many times. It's like, to get back to like football players or whatever, and anybody who wants strength and power, like, you don't see like, people want to do Olympic lifting, not to shit on Olympic lifting. If you love it, that's great, whatever, it makes you a better person, do it. But people want to do Olympic lifting because they see Olympic weightlifters on Olympics as being very powerful, right? But guess who other people are powerful as well? Like you said, like, sprinters are very powerful, right? Gymnasts are very powerful, but you don't see Olympic weightlifters practicing the vault to get powerful.
My opinion, people are very confused into thinking that weightlifting is somehow bleeds into every other sport that you do. Like, if you were a hockey player and I wanted you to get better, I don't think I would say let's put in some reps with soccer, right? Let's play a lot of soccer, right? But for some reason, weightlifting seems to be assumed that always translates, right? But I don't think it does as much as people think. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't get my athletes to weightlift. I don't.
Sure.
But I really reconsider how much and in what way. Like, if your job is to move I don't know. Like if all you need to do is to be able to move yourself and then to move other people of relatively the same mass, right?
Yes.
Then I think the amount of external weight training, in my opinion, has to go down, right? Because that time is better served getting more control of yourself so that you can control others. And then the amount of strength you need is only relative, right? Like, do you really need to be able to move around a weight of 500 pounds if you're a lightweight fighter who has to move around weights of maybe up to 165 on fight night? Now, again, people get really sensitive with this. They're like, well, this is how it's been done and this is how people get strong. Nah, I don't know. Because I don't know if that's how people get strong. And I always use the same example. And I think I've used this on podcasts before, and I hate to repeat myself, but I always go back to like Tyrone Woodley. Tyrone Woodley, the UFC fighter, is built like a brick shithouse, right? And when he fights, everyone always comments about how strong he is, right? Oh my God, he's so strong. His wrestling is strong, and it is. I get, but then you have like Ben Askren, right? And Ben Askren, if you see him physically, there's a big difference, right? Ben Askren looks like anybody's dad, right? It's just but when you talk, the commentators, oh my God, he's so strong, and I think it's a lack of defining. Like, we're not defining what's strong and what's looking muscular and weightlifting. Is weightlifting really going to benefit what I'm trying to do? You talked about squatting, and people talk about squatting is oh my God, everyone has to squat. But is that really true? Why does everyone have to squat? When someone says the deadlift, oh my God, it's the king of exercises. I don't think they understand why they're saying that, because why they're saying the deadlift is the king of exercises, in my opinion, and in the opinion of my scientific, review, I suppose, is because of the global effects of working really goddamn hard. Right?
Yes.
When you strain and push the body and you recruit the maximal amount of tissues, you have endocrine responses, you have global neurological responses, which are amazing, but they're not related necessarily to extending your back and lifting something off the floor. It could have been sucked out of the person in any other different way. Like, set up an isometric and get someone to move an immovable object, and make them do it as hard. No, really try, man. That's a deadlift. Like it's just effort. Your body cares about efforts, and it rewards you for some, and it deteriorates you on others. But it's confusing. People you don't have to be a weightlifter to be a hockey player. You can use some weights for certain things, but it's not for hockey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's only so much training time you have, right? Ultimately, if you want to get better at jiu-jitsu, you should try to do as much fucking jiu-jitsu as you can. Drill, roll, study it, all that kind of stuff. All right, well, what's going to allow me to practice jiu-jitsu the most? Well, jiu-jitsu breaks my body down. Okay, so how do I negate the effects of my body being broken down from dealing with torque? 12 hours, 15 hours a week of awkward torque. Yeah. Well, I should probably torque myself in other ways to bulletproof myself against torque, right? And that's it. So you're healthier, you're practicing jiu-jitsu. Best cardio for jiu-jitsu, fucking jiu-jitsu, right? Like, there's more, you get more efficient at your sport, but at the same time, like we always talk about, is that you have to almost negate the pattern, the negative effects of patternization from a sport. Yes. You have to kind of balance it out, and if it comes to football, it's the same thing. It's like, well, I only got 45 minutes. I have an hour with my guys, and then they have to go do football shit on the field for 2 hours, and I get them 3 days a week. It's like, all right, well, we have to preserve some strength, but most of your guys, they don't have hips, they don't have spines, they don't have shoulders. Why don't we just work on that?
It gets back to it because it's the idea that there's a bias, there's a misunderstanding where you have to grab a weight, you have to lift a weight in order for there to be a benefit of some way. And not only do you have to lift a weight, you have to lift a weight in a predetermined pattern that some conscious brain thought of. Snatches are not fucking normal. Like, I say this all the time. I've said this at lectures, I don't know how many times. I always ask people, like, how many people here think snatches are functional? And everyone puts their hand up. I go, really? How many of you have kids? I have kids. You ever pick your kid up like this? No, because it's like, think of a stupider fucking way of propelling a weight over your head. Think of a dumber, more dangerous way to put a heavy weight over your head other than a snatch. I can't imagine. I can't imagine ever seeing a hunter-gatherer who needs to lift something, thinking to themselves, I'm going to propel it as hard as I can superiorly, and then I'm going to try to sneak underneath it and squat with my spine in a precarious position with my arms extended back, right? Like, that's not something you come up with. It's a pattern, and I love it. And I love Olympic lifting to the extent that I don't do it because I give so much respect. And I've worked with Olympic lifters, and man, it's not a hobby. Like, you know what I mean? You don't
it's not a hobby.
I don't know about dabbling in Olympic lifting like I don't know about just going to a jiu-jitsu club and not telling people you've never done this before and just starting to roll. I don't think that's the idea. Like, you know what I mean? There's, and again, I love snatch all you want. I'm just using it as an example to say that, to get to what you were saying, like, what are you trying to accomplish there? What I was getting at, instead of using your max efforts to, you know, deadlift, your hip doesn't have enough extension. So how can I drive the body and get all of those amazing endocrine releases and neurological global help and neurotransmitter work, and how can I stress the body to get the stress response, which is adaptation? You can do it in a number of different ways. We've just been pigeonholed into thinking that those ways have to say York on the end of them. You know what I'm saying?
It's like people think, oh, you said hip extension, so people are automatically going to think, like, in an exercise library, they'll think hip thrust, they'll think single leg deadlift. I mean, all great stuff, whatever. I love single leg deadlifts. I use them a lot. But you're only in hip extension for like a second in any of those movements because you're going through movement. So you're not spending, as we know, enough time in that position to actually create a change. You're not actually spending enough time to gain neurological experience in hip extension. So what if you have a sprinter? Is it more important that they and I'm just throwing up arbitrary numbers, they do like a 1.5 times body weight deadlift with extended hips at the top, but they still miss 5 to 10 degrees of what they should have for hip extension when you test them? Or is it better that you spend a couple weeks and neurologically mature that hip to access that extra 5 to 10 degrees of hip extension so that they can use that as more of a moment arm when they actually do their sport? You know, these are the kind of fine details that you have to get down to. Is it, all my fast runners, they have a certain number of lifts that they get, right? They like all my fastest runners, they have like two or three times body weight deadlift, this, that, but that's just like, those are arbitrary things that your brain has decided to categorize because you're looking for patterns to replicate making great sprinters versus just taking each sprinter on an individual basis and seeing whether or not they can actually they have the hardware to do what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Because
does that make sense?
Yeah, of course it does. Because it's okay. So we go back to the triple extension exercise. What is that again? The triple extension. They call it clean, I think. A triple extension, is that what it's
called? Jumping, anything jumping.
Yeah, but even though the ankle is plantar flexing, which is very confusing to me. But anyway, it's a triple extension exercise if the things you're trying to extend. So in other words, if your hip can't extend, then thinking to yourself, what is a good exercise for hip extension? You see how it doesn't make any sense. It's either the hip extends or it doesn't. So what you should be saying is not what's a good exercise for hip extension, to train hip extension. You should be asking what's a good way to create hip extension that exercise can subsequently train.
Yeah. Or, take it.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say so take it, if we're joint by joint, you lack inversion, so you don't get quite maximal plantar flexion. You don't have enough tibia external rotation or internal rotation, so your knees don't fully extend, and you don't have a back that's unglued from the hips. But, on coach's eye, you slow motion and it looks like it's triple extension, right? Yeah. So you're just like, well, let's just keep loading that. And it's like, you're not even.
The exercise is triple extension because it's a theoretical movement. That's what it's
Yes.
an imagined movement. No fucking hunter-gatherer got up in the morning, and just started doing triple extension fucking exercises. Like, someone made that shit up, and they made it up with the understanding that everything works. That's what I keep telling people. It's like, is yoga good for my hip? How the hell should I know? I know that it wasn't made for your hip. For sure, it wasn't made for your hip. It's a display of hips. Do you have one? No, then you can't fucking do it. And the other things that I always find funny is that, like, if you say these things like, oh man, the right hip can't extend, but the left hip can, right? And now you gave a squat, which is a hip extension exercise. If I just said the right one can extend and the left one can't, then what you're going to do is you're going to conform, or you're going to accommodate for your internal inabilities, and you're going to produce a squat which is skewed to one side. So in other words, you're going to be reinforcing all of the imbalances that people are running around trying to find. And that, it gets me going on another topic. Therapists looking for these imbalances. I mean, oh, your glutes, it's only firing at this rate on this side, and on this side it's firing at 60, and this one's firing at 30. Let's do some squats. What? You just said one side is at a different ability than the other. So if you do a bilateral exercise, what are you saying? Like, you're going to create imbalance. Whereas what we're saying is make that both of those hips, jump them up to as close as 100 as you can, so that you have balanced exercise and balanced movement. Like,
people don't want to learn their vowels; they just want to make fucking paragraphs.
Dude, you wanted to talk about something like this. You brought this up when we were talking about this. You said you wanted to talk about resetting.
Resetting.
Yeah, that might bring us into this topic. Yeah, what were you?
Well, I don't know. I probably got triggered and saw something online. That always happens, and I text you.
I say it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be okay. No, I just think it all kind of comes back to things that you've lectured about and you've talked about, is that people have an idea that the body has an inherent baseline, right? Mm-hmm. It's got this like kind of either like a magical alignment. It's got an idea that where it likes its hips or whatever, when really, like we've said, like the body just wants to make more of itself. And however it does that the most effectively, it doesn't give a shit if, you pronate when you do it or whatever. Right. So so you take that whole evolutionary perspective, which we've, talked about already. And then people, I don't know if it's being intellectually lazy. I don't know if it's a catch-all, but something like reset. They like, oh, this is just going to reset the hips. To what? What are you resetting it to? Like, this is going to reset the nervous system. What does that mean? I don't like, but it's a catch-all for everything.
None of those people, like, if you studied neurology, like, okay. So getting back to the evolutionary process, if you look at how humans were forged, if you look at how the genome was forged, man, it was one word: chaos. Like, just different layers of different things, of different stressors, and stressors change with asteroids, and stressors change with floods, and stressors change with fucking climates, and viruses, and things died and came back, and now you have these layers of. But why do you think the brain's so fucking complicated, man? You have, what is it, like 86 billion neurons approximately, making trillions of connections, which are changing, and because it's a plastic brain, on a moment by moment basis. So when you say, I know you're going to figure out the reset, what you're saying is you are able to track the ongoing activity of 86 billion neurons making trillions of connections that change on a moment by moment basis. Like, what kind of computational fucking math do you have that you are arrogant enough to say, no, if you touch here, the pelvis resets? The pelvis resets. Have you ever dissected a human being? Because I have, I taught dissection, and I know that you've studied the human being, so I'm just yelling at you.
Yeah, because I'm around.
If you dissected a human being and you look at a pelvis, and and the effects of change over time and the adaptation and how the hip and arthritis, you see a system trying to fix itself over time because there's so many stressors that are undetermined. I sit for this much. I had an injury when I was 12. I fell out of my treehouse and my treehouse fell on top of me. And then I fucking had to do this and this was broken. There's trillions of variables. To say that I'm going to do something and I'm going to reset your pelvis is to insult 600 years of the scientific process. Because 600 years since the dawn of the scientific age, thousands of people studying, putting millions of papers out, trying to figure shit out. And then you were alive in the small little bit of human history, which is in a small little bit of global history. Like we're just a not even a millisecond in terms of importance. And you figured out how to reset the pelvis? I've been studying my whole life. I don't even know. I'm not even close to resetting a pelvis. Did I get my point across there?
No. I think you've angered enough people.
No, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can reset a pelvis. I don't know, man. I've been around. I've taught all over the world. So have you. I've talked to. Maybe it's me, man.
I think with reset, that means there's an inherent default. Like if I reset my computer, I got a computer. It was the first day I got it. It had nothing on it, right? And then whatever, I had to change the hard drive. It got reset. It's back to where I got it. Like that makes sense. But when somebody resets your pelvis, what the fuck does that mean? Like what was the original position? How do you know?
That makes sense for a computer. It doesn't make sense for a biological system who is being penalized by entropy on an ongoing basis. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you saying? It's you're breaking down. You're moving from a more organized state to a less organized state. And if you think maintaining a human being can be done with anything other than effort, you're the smartest person in the history of the world. Like you've unlocked the mysteries of humanity if you think that you can reset a pelvis. I just don't know what else to tell you, man.
Yeah. No, I get it. I mean, are they, they want to reset, like I said, reset the nervous. It just seems like a very intellectually lazy or dishonest way for communicating your lack of understanding.
Going back to consciousness research, if you do dabble in consciousness research and you start to realize, which meditation helps with as well, there's no little Dre in bigger Dre's brain at the control, right? There's no little Dre at the helm of a computer pressing buttons. That's not how it works, man. There's centers of the brain which try to grab attention and throw these. It's more complex. It's just more complex, man. It's hard work.
If it's emergent, we're gonna go back to consciousness for a second. If it's emergent, like how do you have an identity? Like how do you know who you are? Like how do you remember your high school? How do you well, I'm this because I've always done this. Like I vote Republican, I vote Democrat. Like I like pie. Like if it's so emergent, where does this shit come from?
You just asked me to completely. You want me to take the entire practice of Buddhism and you want me to bring it right down into 1 second so we can figure it out. That's the whole point of the non-self, right? That's the whole point, is that what you are now is not what you are 10 years from now. Conceivably, and now people are gonna, because the internet is full of assholes, but no, I'm just joking. But people are gonna jump on this. But conceivably, 10 years from now, all of the cells that make up Josh, none of the cells that are here now are gonna be here 10 years from now. Minus some in the eyeball and there's a few in the heart. So smart asses, there's some in the heart. I know. But conceivably, every 10 years, most of your body changes. You can actually say, if you have a recording of yourself from 10 years ago and you're on trial for murder and there's a video of you stabbing someone and the judge says, Josh, is that you? Scientifically, you can kind of say no, right? All of the cells that were there are no longer in me right now. So of course you're not the same person you were 20 years ago, which is why I always think that people that say people don't change it's a strange and a self-defeating philosophy to live by. because people do change. That's the definition of people. Like entropy makes it so that everything changes all the time. So to see that people can't change is weird. People change all the time, right? It's like you're who you are with me, but you're not who you are with me with your wife, I hope, because that would be strange. But what I mean is, like, you're a different Josh with your wife. You're a different Josh with any relationship you have, right?
Sure.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer. What the hell am I? I'm just a fucking therapist. But no, I don't. Yeah, you're who you are right now, conceivably, and of course you're influenced by the past, and I get that. But you can only use the past to use it to help you with what you're doing right now. So it does all come back to right now, right? There's really nothing else to talk about other than right now.
Well, the only reason that you would have a capacity to remember the past from a hunter-gatherer standpoint is to help you, like you said, with right now. Like, oh, I remember, like, when it was about this temperature many moons ago, there were strawberries here. So let me go back and look for strawberries or whatever they were. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're only using that. But, you know, taking all that now in our kind of non-human environment, I mean, that's why that's the best case ever for a concentration practice. Because you're not you, right? Like, you could right now decide not to be Dre.
Yeah, sure.
And like, because it's not real.
No.
Right? It's just electrons in your brain that are on loop.
Yeah.
Saying, oh, my name is this. I believe this. I've done this. I had this happen to me when I was 5. You know, whatever. And like, you could just immediately right now just disconnect from that, have some separation.
Sure.
You know, if you did it too long, you'd think you're insane. But just to know that you can parachute out of your identity, I think it helps a lot, especially when you're, trying to explain similar concepts like this with people with pain. Like, they bring it back to the people we've been working with and stuff like that. And just having that flexibility, that flexibility in how you perceive things. So much of what we do is teaching people how to concentrate. Another thing I wanted to just kind of bring it back to what we kind of see a lot in the fitness industry is that we don't, unfortunately, because people just don't acknowledge what we are, you come up with a bunch of bullshit to try to fix stuff that doesn't need to be fixed. And you've talked about this for years, right? And I remember there was a conversation I had with Hunter Fitness. That's his last name, Fitness. It was sometime in Europe, but basically it was like, if you had if you had a fish and you took a fish out of water, but you left it in like either a fish bowl or enough water for it to breathe, and the fish started to develop problems, like it wasn't activating its fin, you would say like, oh, the fish just needs to go back in water, right? You just need to put the fish back in water. But what we do, if we apply how we look at humans and we apply it to that fish, we would have to come up with mini band exercises for that fin. Or we'd have to find that, oh, I noticed that the fish, its spine doesn't articulate well. Maybe it needs a chiropractor for its spine. And it's like, no, just fucking take it and put it back in the ocean.
Yeah.
Or it's like, oh, I noticed that the left gills, they can't access the left gills when it breathes. I think that's what's causing the issues. And it's like, no, it's just not in its environment. And so if anything, if people get anything.
Or something bit a chunk out of it and now its left gill's not working. And now you have to fix that. But you see what I'm saying? Like,
you just get a Theragun.
Yeah, you just need to put vibration on it. That's going to help. Because all that research on vibration. No, there's not.
There's none.
Theragun's really upsetting. Anyway.
And if, for people who maybe aren't in the fitness industry, but follow a lot of stuff that's like that, and like you always kind of get inundated with all this kind of like gimmicky stuff, it just always have to revert it back to like, what the fuck did cavemen do?
Yeah.
Like, what did they do? Like, if you come back all the time to that evolutionary perspective, right, then it's really going to help you sift out a lot of shit.
Yeah, but then, of course, people listening to this are going to go, people just.
What are they going to say?
What are they going to say? I'll tell you what they're going to say. They're going to go, well, you don't know what was it. Hunter-gatherers also rested. I've heard all of this, right? It's like I didn't know that. Because I will always say that, like, for example, that you should train something more along the lines of to what your human genome dictates, right? And when your human genome was being forged, it wasn't being forged in a time where you took all of your force inputs and jammed them into a 45-minute espresso booty fucking class at lunch, right? Like, that's not a normal way to train. to condense all of your force loading into 1 hour of a WOD, right? It should go something more like there's forces distributed through the day, like you have a 24-hour training day, right? And that's what we're getting at. And what we're also saying is that, like, if you look at hunter-gatherer populations, the amount of caloric expenditure was way higher than ours. But they still rested. We're not stupid. I'm not telling people to just, persistence hunt every day. But no, I'm telling people to maybe think about what the body requires, what it wants. When does it get upset? When you're loading someone in 1 hour with imaginary weight, bringing up the idea of squatting, it's a natural movement. It's a natural movement when you're picking something up. When you put a 45-pound straight bar with circular masses on each end, and then balance it on the C7 spinous process, and then squat in a way so that you balance this external weight in your environment, that's not normal. That's a bar squat, which is that's not a normal thing to do, right? That's not, people think that this is, it's normal to deadlift because you pick things up off the floor. Well, no, it's normal to pick things off the floor. What's not normal is doing it with a straight bar in the exact same way at infinitum for the rest of your fucking life. That's a problem. That's a problem.
You weren't picking up the antelope for 3 sets of 10 off the ground.
Once that antelope died, you were done, right? You weren't snatching the antelope. You were like, hey, Jim, can you do this? Like, no one was doing that, right?
Yeah. And it's not as much as the immediate effects of what happens. It's the long-term changes that happen to the structure over the body, the patterns that happen, your bones change over enough time and input to accommodate or adapt to what you're doing. And a lot of times those can be maladaptations,
Just had a weird thought. Consciousness really fucked everything up, didn't it? I mean, like, maybe the evolutionary, the natural, how natural selection is not moving people towards optimum? People often think that, bipedal posture was somehow more efficient than quadrupedal posture, and that's why humans decided to become bipedal, even though bipedalism is not a feat of humans, it's a feat of simians. Like, they were bipedal in the trees before they were on the ground. That's what the new research says. But anyway. So we always think like maybe consciousness it's beneficial. And we talked about how it might be beneficial because consciousness allows you to predict more of the future. And if you can predict the future, you can put things in place to temporarily circumvent entropy in order to build things. I don't want to get too far into that. We've talked about that before. Where was I going? I was going that, but there's probably a byproduct of consciousness, which I think is causing all this negativity. Like, think, your body naturally selects for more and more awareness of itself because you can make predictions. But then as soon as you tip the balance and now you have too much awareness of yourself, well, now you have the anxiety of pending death, right?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like you go to a point and then it stops being a good evolutionary mechanism. And conceivably, if you look at the human species and you put it up against the beetle, we're going to be the least successful species ever if we're on the current course. Like, if you look at how long we've been here, there's a lot of species that are way more successful for us, like fucking water bears, right? Way more successful than us in the grand scheme of things. So maybe consciousness, if predictions are right and we're all, going towards making ourselves extinct, that might have been the one step too far on the natural selection process. Like, think about our patients. What's the problem? The problem is not that they have, their appetites are weird, right? It's not like my client has a weird appetite and that's why he or she overate and has diabetic symptoms. No, it's options, right?
Yeah.
There's no, like, what I'm pretty sure that if you look at obesity in the animal kingdom, the only problematic animals are humans and those things that are fed by humans, right? Right?
They're the only things.
Overweight cat, but you're not going to have an overweight fucking leopard. You know what I'm saying? Because, but it's consciousness makes it so that if I want to eat, I can now go to the store because we created civilization, and I can make decisions between a Big Turk, an O. Henry, and a you know what I mean, and a bag of chips. And then the bag of chips, there's like 17 different flavors of chips, all of which will activate my brain chemistry in a slightly different way for me to say, oh my God, ketchup flavor. But there's all of this extra shit, right? And to get it, it's relatively easy. I literally have to pull into my pocket and tap my card, right? So now consciousness made all of this stuff, but it's also the reason why, you know, we're eating ourselves into early graves and we're not exercising because it's not necessary anymore because of consciousness.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I think you're 100% right. And you add on to the fact that most people aren't satisfied with what they have to do to make enough, you know, money, to make survival points to get these things. And we have a lot of people, we don't have as much tight-knit communities as we used to have. You know, humans are a very social animal. So it's like all of these things are kind of splintering like what we have going on. I'm convinced that, like, I hope I don't have it, but it's like all this like kind of early onset dementia from just constantly getting buzzed by your phone. You know, oh, I got an email from you. Oh, cool. But I also got 5 text messages from 3 different people. And then I have like 6 comments I have to get to, and the blah, blah, blah. And it's like all these things are really fraying our attention, our ability to focus on stuff. And then you're so blown out by the end of the day, you just want easy, comforting calories. And you're probably not going to move. And like, unfortunately, this is experience for a lot of people. And it's probably because consciousness, the way we have it, was fine before we got into agriculture. Maybe like we got like dope brains that like remember shit, can think of shit, are creative. And it's awesome when you just live in trees and there's no like, you know, you're not surrounded by corners and you go from one box to another throughout your day. But you take this like hyped up state of self-awareness that in the right environment is clutch. You're the apex predator, and you put it in where we are today, and you know, that's where it starts to cause problems. Now, I don't want people to think that like you and I want to go back to being hunter-gatherer. That shit sucked. It was hard. You probably like got dysentery, you know, and stuff like that.
I don't know. Have you looked into Civilized to Death yet?
I have. I have to finish it. I'm like halfway through it.
Yeah, I mean,
you want to let people know? It's like an alternate narrative on how we consider success from a civilization standpoint.
Yeah, the whole premise of that book, it's why can't I remember the name of the author?
It's Chris Ryan.
Chris Ryan. So the premise was that, you know, pre-civilization wasn't as bad as you might think, right? So like, for example, one of the things that people often go to is like, look at our what's the life expectancy? Look how high our life expectancy is. When you back in the hunter-gatherer days, you lived till 20. Well, that's not true at all, because if you look at the average age of death, it gets skewed because back then there were a lot more infantile deaths. There were a lot more deaths at birth, right? So it brings the average down. But if you could get by the first few years of life, the age expectancy was where it is right now, right? And then there's also some evidence to say that even the things that extend our life, if you look at the years that are being extended, if you contrast that with the quality of life surveys, you realize that all of the extended years are spent on average in depressed states of living, with less ability for human happiness, like pain, dementia, whatever. Even and I'm going back to Chris Ryan's book because I never researched that specifically, but he even mentioned stuff like the Heimlich maneuver, or when someone is drowned in a pool and we bring them back to life. Everyone talks about the save rates of those procedures, but what they don't tell you is that the mortality rate of those people moving forward is really bad. Like most people, when they get resuscitated, they go to a hospital and then the chance of them surviving is not that much, even if they get resuscitated. Yeah. I mean, there's just a lot of I mean, you read these things, you can't be up to date on all research, but I am, I have studied evolutionary biology for quite a long period of time, and I can't say I disagree. I mean, you can say life is awesome now, but you're saying life is awesome now because it's catered to the to your consciousness, right? Because before, watching a fire was fucking amazing, man. It's still conceivably now. I don't care how exciting watching internet, whatever is, watching a fire brings out something in a human that nothing, watching water lap against against rock, anything like that. But now our reward system's so fucked up that now we ignore our human reward system, like moving to get our what we know this, move around, you're going to increase the endogenous cannabinoid production, and you're going to get stoned, right? Do a good movement session, really be in there and concentrate and you feel like you're high, you feel stoned. It's a reward mechanism. But now you can get that reward mechanism from taking a pill, right? Or you know what I mean? It's fucked with our human reward system. That's really ultimately what the problem is.
That book was interesting because it also kind of, and you have to refresh me on some of that, but basically too, it talked about how, like, you know, the engine for civilization was human labor, human slaves. Basically, is that as civilizations grew, they needed more people to do the lower end work, so they just engulfed more people. And you know,
which automatically starts a casting system, which propagates to today. Ridiculous systems of you know, these people are for this and these people can do this but not that. I mean, it comes from it, even, I mean, going back to that book again, he talks about the role of women back in hunter-gatherer populations, which was an exalted role, right? They just as important, if not more important, or equal, of course, equally as important as any man in the tribe, right?
Yes.
Then where did that go wrong? It seems like civilization. So I guess to review that book, it's like, if you think of everything that went wrong, you can kind of trace it back to the advent of human civilization. You talked about dysentery, right? But was dysentery there before we overpopulated the world and had problems with sanitation? Right? Was malaria, tuberculosis, when did that start? Was there tuberculosis in hunter-gatherer days? Most of the diseases that we complain about today were invented at the onset of human civilization, like chronic low back pain and chronic, bring it back to our profession. When does that start happening? It happens on the onset of human civilization. That's when you start to get the fossil records demonstrating increased amounts of degenerative disc disease. And, you know, bipedalism was one, civilization was the other.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, there had to be humans that had to realize not to shit in the river that they're going to drink from. You had to
or there wasn't enough cumulative shit because there wasn't 7 or 8 billion people shitting simultaneously, right? You shit into an ocean, you know, the molecules dissipate. You shit into a puddle, you have a problem. So
yeah, I mean, if you take a dump in the Nile River and then you're going to go hike, 15 miles the other way, it's not going to be a big deal, right? But
I think we've reached the end of our conversation, Josh.
I hope people feel better after listening to this.
No, man, not after that one about you're going to hold your wife's hand for the last time. That happened like 20 minutes into this marathon. That really brought me down. I hope you pick them back up with the understanding that all of their reward systems are skewed and that
civilization isn't
is ultimately doomed. Having said all that, I am an optimist. Maybe we'll get to that at the next episode.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to unpack. We could talk about how to make things better.
Nah, fuck that. Hours. Let's leave that for part two.
Part two.
Part two.
Exactly.
Talking with Josh.
Awesome.
All right, man. You got anything to say? You're teaching a seminar this weekend, correct? Are you?
Yeah, I'm teaching with Dewey and Brian this weekend.
Dewey, what are you guys doing? You're doing an FRC.
FRC.
Yeah, FRC. Okay. And then there's
some
other stuff. Anyway, seminars at functionalanatomyseminars.com. Also check out our other sponsor, Westside Barbell, westside-barbell.com. Use the promo code DRE10 at checkout. You get 10% off their merchandise, their educational materials, and a lot of other good stuff. All right, my brother, I'm going to talk to you soon.
All right, man. Thank you so much.
Later, brother.
Peace.